They fought with each other a lot, like physically trading blows with each other. And I'm just thinking to myself, I know you guys are fighting right now because you hate each other or whatever other reason it is that you're fighting with each other right now. But this is hot. I finally got my hands on my most anticipated release of the year, and I gobbled this up in 2 days. That really is the only word I can think of to describe the experience of reading it, because I was working overtime, extremely sleep deprived, but I still managed to finish reading this because it was that good. And I was going to fix that statement and call it my most anticipated danmei release of the year, but after thinking about it, it really is just my most anticipated release of the year, period. And this is a beloved favorite of the danmei fandom, so I've been so excited to read it. And I was a little bit worried that it was going to disappoint me because of all the hype around it, but it did not. It did everything that I expected it to. It met my expectations, possibly even exceeded it. I do not want to say more than that because this is just the first book in many. I did look this up online. It has 280 something chapters, and this first volume covers only 40 chapters. So I'm estimating that this is going to have about 7 to 8 books. We have a long way to go. But this first book delivered extremely well. And I finished reading it about 30 minutes ago. I am so excited. I have so much energy just coursing through me after reading it. And I figured the only way to kind of just let all of that out was to turn on the camera and film my review of it. I took some notes to make sure that I try to say as much as I actually want to say without forgetting anything. So I'm going to be looking at my phone while I'm filming. But the very first thing I wanted to go over is the cover. I don't think I've said the title of this. This is Shanjinjo, the first volume of Ballad of Sword and Wine. That is the translation that was picked for the book. I think I've seen it translated as something else online. Maybe it was like Bring in the Wine or Shall We Have a Drink or something like that. I'm always just making stuff up in these videos. I'm going to look up the original thing and put the text on the screen. But yes, I'm pretty sure that when I heard of it before it got licensed, the translation was not Ballad of Sword and Wine. So I'm going to look for whatever that was and then put it on the screen. But the first thing I wanted to go over was the cover. Beautiful cover. If the camera is not capturing it as well as I want to, I'm going to do an overlay so you can get a better look at that. The paper quality is still pretty much the same as the Pet Palmfish book, but I was kind of already expecting it, so that wasn't too disappointing. But the cover though, it looks like they used a heavier weight of cardstock than they usually use for all of their other covers. It feels really nice. It has a smooth matte finish, and the words of the title are embossed, so it's like raised from the title a little bit, and it just feels so good to the touch. I don't know why, but I wanted to mention that. But yeah, it feels really good, and I love the way the cover has been designed. So for my isolated reviews, I usually have a way that I talk through everything in the video. I'm going to read the synopsis, then kind of do a summary of the plot based on the synopsis and what I read, and then a quick review or my first impression before doing a more in-depth review using the CAWPILE rating system. So starting with the synopsis on the back of the book. Shan Zechuan is the 8th son of the traitorous prince of Jiangxing. Okay, I just realized that I actually did not go to the back of the book to see how these names are pronounced, so pardon me if I am butchering them, and I will start reading that all over again. Shan Zechuan is the 8th son of the traitorous prince of Jiangxing, a man who doomed his cities and people to destruction at the hands of the foreign enemy. As the only surviving member of his reviled line, Shan Zechuan bears the hatred of the nation, and no one's hate burns hotter than that of Shao Qiye, the youngest son of the powerful prince of Libei. Shao Qiye would love nothing more than to see Shan Zechuan dead, but against all odds, he clings to life. Rather than succumb to his family's disgrace, he becomes a thorn in Shao Qiye's side, clawing his way into the cutthroat political world of the capital. Yet as these two bitter enemies struggle against the bonds of their fate, they find themselves drawn together with a force neither expected and neither can hope to resist. Seriously. It was very irresistible. But the overall plot of the series, if I'm trying to make it very, very simple, this is an enemies to lovers story with a historical setting and lots of political intrigue. So you have the first main character, Shen Zichuan, who is the 8th son of the traitor, the prince of Jiangxing. His father had committed this crime and then he killed himself. So now he has to be the one to bear all the crimes that his father committed, because there's nobody left for people to point fingers at or for people to direct their hate and anger at. And as the only surviving member of this traitor's family, he now basically has to take responsibility for all of those things, which is stupid to me. I understand it, but it is very annoying. And so he basically becomes like a prisoner of war, and due to a lot of political things going on in the story, I do not want to give spoilers, but even if I wanted to try, it's just going to take forever because there is a lot going on. It was very easy to understand though, but yes, there is a lot going on. Due to some things, political things going on in the background, he was able to stay alive, even though by all rights he should probably be dead by now. He is alive, and a thorn in Shao-Chi's side. Oh my god. I'm going to talk more about them, but their dynamic was so interesting to read. I really enjoyed it. But the other thing I wanted to mention about the book was the fact that this one does come with a map. A lot of stories that have like historical settings and have political intrigue settings with expansive world building, stories like Stars of Chaos, Thousand Autumns, with lots of locations, factions, allyships, and just many things going on in the story. They don't usually have maps, and that kind of makes them hard to read because you're trying to keep track of so many locations in your head. But while you're trying to keep track of those locations, you have to remember them in reference to other locations while trying to understand the plot of the story. There's just way too much going on. But this map was really a beautiful addition to this book. It made it so easy to read, but the translation was also beautifully. This book was much easier to read than I expected, because going in and knowing that this is a story with a political intrigue as its main plot, I was already really worried about how easy it was going to be to read. But it was honestly so easy to read. The fact that I was able to read it while being sleep deprived and still able to pay so much attention to it and remember so much detail is shocking to me, but that's because it was easy to read. And it was easy to read without taking away the element of intrigue in the story. So it's still a good story, but the writing just flows really well. So if you had any reservations about reading this because of the political intrigue or anything, I would say go ahead and give it a try. It's probably much easier to read than you think. So that was my review of the book in general, but I finished it and I rated it 5 stars because it was honestly so amazing. And I just remembered another thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't realize when I started reading it. But I did not look up what the characters in this, I did not do any prior research on this book before reading it. I found out that it was licensed even though it had been on my TBR for a while, and I just figured I'm going to read it when it gets physically printed. So I knew nothing about this series going in. And so from the synopsis, I just made my own judgment or used the synopsis to assign what the characters looked like in the book. And I figured, okay, traitor, that's going to be this buff dude at the bottom right here that looks all haughty and cocky, and his enemy, the Prince of Libe, the youngest son that hates him, I thought was just going to be like a sheltered, pampered little prince or something like that. So I thought, okay, that's definitely going to be the pretty guy in white right here. I was very, very wrong, and I did not figure that out until like the 40th page of the book, where Shao-Chi makes his first appearance in the book, and that was also the first illustration in the book. Imagine my shock when I flip it over and I see that this buff dude is actually the youngest prince that hates the traitor's son. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I was not expecting that at all. It didn't change a whole lot for me, but I did have to adjust my understanding or my interpretation of the story based on that reassigning of characters for the 2 main characters. So yes, that was also something that happened. It was just shocking enough that I wanted to mention that. But yes, that was my first impression of the book. 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. And now I am going to talk through the CAWPILE rating system, talking through all of the categories. I've already assigned numbers to all of the categories, and this was still a 5-star with a CAWPILE rating system. So spoiler alert, it was still 5 stars regardless. And this is the highest rating I've given to a book the entire year. I mean, there are some books that I've read this year that I haven't taken through the CAWPILE rating system, but for the ones that I have, this is the highest. It was higher than a 9. So it earned that 5-star very much. It was a 5-star. It wasn't even barely scraping the 5-star range. It was firmly within the 5-star range. But yes, that is enough rambling. I'm going to go ahead and start talking through the CAWPILE rating system. The first letter in the CAWPILE rating system is C, which stands for characters. I gave that category 8.5 points. There are characters I'm going to think of pretty often, and I think they were really good. Of course, you have the 2 main characters, Xiao Qiye and Shun Zechuan, but then you also have a lot of secondary characters in a setting like this. And I feel like some of them were fleshed out decently enough to remain in your memory, or at least be able to remember them while you were reading, because there were so many of them. But I was able to remember them based on the details that have been given to, about them throughout the story, and use it to understand the story as a whole. So I thought that was something that the author did really well. I even started feeling connected or invested in some of the characters, especially Xiao Qiye's family. They give off really good vibes, and I might be jumping the gun here, but I love them. They just seem like really cool people. But one challenge with having so many secondary characters is the fact that you have so many names that they can be referred to as. Of course, you have your given name, your courtesy names, and then titles in stories like this. And with so many characters, you have to keep track of all of them. I mean, I understand why it's necessary, because it helps highlight the relationships between all of these characters, depending on what name that they use to address one character or the other. But that is just the fate of being a danmei reader. You have to remember a lot of things. That's not a complaint that I'm going to make. Now, back to the main characters. They're dynamic. It was really good. The enemies to hate was awesome. This is the best enemies to hate enemies to lovers that I have read in a very... Why did I keep saying enemies to hate? I don't know why I said that. Enemies to lovers I've read in a very long time. The 2 characters, they're very strong-willed. They're very mouthy, smart. Their banter between each other, the sarcasm, the sexual tension. I actually jokingly labeled the topic that I used to tab their interactions with each other enmity/sexual tension. That was just a joke, but there was really so much sexual tension between the both of them. They fought with each other a lot, like physically trading blows with each other, and I'm just thinking to myself, I know you guys are fighting right now because you hate each other, or whatever other reason it is that you're fighting with each other right now, but this is hot. Every interaction between them was so hot. Like, if I already like them so much right now as enemies, I can't even imagine how much more I'm going to be obsessed with them when all of this hatred that they have burning for each other gets transitioned over to loving each other. It's going to be beautiful. And even though they're enemies, I can also easily see how they can come to love each other, if that makes sense. There's some enemies that you read about that you just wonder, how are these 2 going to get together? Not in this case. I mean, and the reason I'm saying that is because after reading the first book, I feel like they're both prisoners born of different circumstances, but are still kind of the results of the situation of the world around them. So on one hand, you have Shun Zechuan, who is a prisoner by all rights. Like, he's actually a prisoner because he has to answer to the crimes his father committed. So everyone labels him as a prisoner. He is actually a prisoner. But on the flip side, Xiao Qiye is a prisoner of his situation because he comes from a military family. This is kind of a spoiler, but I'll try not to give too much details. But he has basically been detained to a place where he shouldn't really be, to limit his family's ability to do certain things in this story. And that kind of makes him a prisoner because his movement and things that he can do, or even interactions with family and friends, have now been extremely limited. So they can relate to each other in that way. And at the end of the book, they actually started talking about something similar. After I already wrote it, I'm like, oh my God, this is the perfect way to describe their relationship with each other. And I wrote it down, so I'm going to try to read it out. It is on page 412. And here, Xiaoqiye is starting to relate to Shan Zechuan as a character, which I figured was going to eventually happen. And he says, Shan Zechuan was not invincible. Beyond their cryptic challenges and the dread of each other, they shared the inexplicable empathy of fellow sufferers. So you can already see that they have that one thing connecting them to each other. And misery loves company. They are going through something that probably only the both of them can understand. And once they start seeing eye to eye on some of those things, I can easily see how their relationship can change from what it is right now to being people who love each other. And again, I'm just really excited to read that in the future. They really had such a good dynamic with each other, and I love the way that they've both been written. It was really good. I don't know what else to say about it. The only other character that's not really a main character that I wanted to talk about was the Empress in this story. She is the one pulling the strings in all the political mumbo jumbo shenanigans going on in the story, and I just thought it was kind of ironic because I'm also watching an anime titled Yatagarasu, and that also has a lot of political intrigue. You have a succession war going on, and in that story the Empress is the one pulling the strings as well. So I started thinking about it, like, why is it the Empress in both of these stories? But in these historical settings, right, with the way women were viewed and how they just basically marry into the royal family and they become vessels to just produce heirs. When your entire life's purpose basically boils down to just being a baby making machine, I can imagine how you will become so fucking obsessed with the idea of power that you start doing all of these things. And I understand it, but also doesn't justify their actions because they're dooming people that are basically family to them and people who have nothing to do with everything that's going on to very terrible fates. The first emperor in this story died, and right before he died, he was talking about how being an emperor is such a lonely fate, and it was just such a sad part of the book to read. That's another thing that I'm going to read out because I just thought it was so beautifully written and it explains the situation so well. So that was on page 264. This is probably the section that I'm going to talk about the most anyway, so I might as well just let out everything I want to say. But he says it right here. In the future, just as our father was and just as we have, you will become that same lonely man on the throne. We were like you, an idle prince. The whims of fate are unpredictable. In the end, this empire fell into our hands. But since our ascension, we have been constrained at every turn. Each move was like a puppet dancing before a screen. If the imperial mother wants us to laugh, we laughed. And now she wants us to die, so we must die. I cannot even imagine how it must feel to be in a position like that. Technically, you have power, being the ruler of this empire, but you're wary of everyone. You know that everyone has it out for you. There are people that want to kill you. There are people that don't respect you, and you're just in that position as basically a puppet. It's honestly just such a sad fate. And if you think deeply about all the strings being pulled in political intrigue stories like this, it is just, everyone's reality is kind of sad. The people that are in the thick of the political intrigue and the roles they have to play, the decisions that they have to make, it is really sad. All the people that become like, I can't think of the word, so I'm just going to describe it another way. All the people that get dragged into the political strife going on, even though they weren't directly involved in it in the first place, everything about the situation is just sad. And I like reading stories like this. I find that they are intriguing and they hold my attention a lot, and you have to do a lot of thinking. But over the years, it also helps me to think deeply about each of the situations that every character in the story has been placed in, and just dig deeper into their situation. So I enjoyed that about the story. So that was the category for C, characters. The next category is atmosphere and authenticity for the letter A. I gave that 9, and I forgot to write down what that means, but the atmosphere was pretty simple in this. It was mostly based around war and political intrigue, and I feel like I've already kind of lumped that into the character category, talking about the atmosphere of like the political intrigue and the historical setting. I mean, you know that it's a historical setting, but I don't feel like there were many things that pointed to that specifically in the story. Now that I think about it, I guess it was just woven so well into the story that there's nothing that really stands out. But I'm going to look for what that 9 rating means in the scale that I usually use, and I'm going to put that on the screen. I honestly cannot remember what exactly stood out about the atmosphere that made me rate it a 9 right now, but I'm going to put that on the screen. Sorry. I'm going to prepare better for that next time. The writing, I give that 10 points. I thought the writing was excellent. I already talked about this a little bit earlier, but it was much easier to read than I expected. And another thing I really appreciated about the writing was the fact that the chapters were really short. Each chapter was about 10 pages each, and that made it very easy to consume, especially for a story like this that can be hard to take in because of everything that's going on. But because the chapters were broken down into such small pieces, it was easy to consume them in bits and pieces and just be able to finish reading one chapter. You could decide to maybe think about what you just read or leave it alone and come back to it later. Although the writing flows so well, you really don't have to do that. And there are parts of it that have this prose-like quality. People that have read the fan translation before it got licensed did mention that it had a very poetic, prose-like writing style. I honestly wish that I could read this originally in Chinese. There were parts of the text that were so beautifully described. It was mostly Xiao Qie's description of Shen Zichuan, and I'm just reading it like, damn, this guy is waxing poetic about this other man's body. But it was so beautiful to read, and I wish I could read it in Chinese. But the translation team that did this still did such an amazing job. I actually have to give them props for how good of a job they did. The writing flowed like butter. It was so easy to read. I don't know how else I can describe it. It was just so easy to read. Everything flowed so smoothly. It was awesome, which is why I gave this section 10 points. Excellent writing. The next category is for the letter P, which stands for plot, and I gave that 10 points. I thought it was awesome, and the execution was pretty great. And I'm talking about the execution specifically because for a plot like this, enemies to lovers, with the historical setting, political intrigue and all of that stuff, it's not exactly a new plot. If you read a lot, honestly, there probably aren't a whole lot of plots that feel completely new and fresh to you. You've seen a little bit of everything over the years from reading multiple things. So ultimately, I feel like writers and authors have to appeal to their audience and grab their attention with their execution. And I thought this was very well executed. I liked how all the main plots, the subplots, the interactions between the characters, I liked how everything was handled. And another thing that really stood out to me was how, even though I went into this, and the map made me a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw it, because I'm like, oh my god, the map, the world building is going to be crazy, and all these factions and characters that I have to remember for a story like this. But the writing approached it in such a way that nothing really felt overwhelming in this first book. Now, I don't know if that's going to change in the future as the plot starts to thicken or build up, but for an introduction to the series, I thought it wasn't too bad. Yes, there were a lot of characters, but I was able to remember the key players. Even though there were a bunch of them, I was able to remember them because of the way that they were introduced and the way that their characters were handled in this first book, which I honestly can say for a lot of books. If someone just feels like an unimportant character, you're likely not going to remember their name when they pop up again, and you're just like, huh, who is that? That hardly happened in this book, and I think that is because of the way the plot was handled and how all the characters, main and secondary, were woven into the storytelling, and that made everything just work beautifully together. So that was why I gave that 10 points. Another 10 points will be for the next category of intrigue, and I give this one 10 points because I literally read it into the night, even though I should have been sleeping. I haven't gotten much sleep this week in general, and I don't know how I'm functioning right now, but whatever. I'll deal with that in the future someday. In general, I know how plots like this usually play out. You know, there's a lot of political intrigue, lots of people are going to be dying, there's a succession war. You know how they're going to play out, but how the author decides to handle all the events that leads to however the story is going to end is going to be an intriguing aspect of a story like this. Because even though you know there's going to be a lot of death, killing, backstabbing, and whatever else is going on, you have different characters, and there's just so many pieces. If you're looking at it like a chess piece or like a goal board, whatever floats your boat, there are so many pieces that can be used and so many directions that pieces can be moved in to make the story flow well before it actually culminates in the intended end that the author has in mind. So there is that intriguing aspect of it. But I also have questions. Some pertaining to the story and others that are kind of like discussion points after reading the book. The very first question I have is for Shunwei, the trader. Now, I'm not really expecting anyone to answer this. It's just something that I thought about. And now that I think about it, this question was handled later on in the book, like at the later end in the book. But I had a question around the fact that he decided to kill himself after everything that he did to basically evade all the war that was going on and everything he was accused of. You know what, this isn't something I have to bring up anymore because I already kind of have an answer to it. But if you were curious about that as well, I guess I've brought that up now. My other question, now this is one that hasn't been addressed and is likely going to be addressed in the future. When Shen Zichuan was taken as a prisoner or as a criminal to answer to his father's crimes, and he was being questioned about his all the things that his father was accused of, he was adamant about the fact that his father didn't do those things. And the reason why this stood out to me was because he was born to a woman of common birth, so he wasn't like a main son, I guess, and he lived apart from his father and his older brothers and was basically sent out of the house to be raised by someone completely different. So he wasn't raised as this man's son. He really didn't know his father as his actual father. He could have pretty much just been a stranger to him. I've just described him as a sperm donor in my notes, which is pretty much who he is. He's estranged to his father, so he doesn't know everything that his father does, but he was adamant about saying that his father didn't do those things when he was questioned. And I feel like that is a choice that he intentionally made to say that, because he could have said that he didn't know. I don't think that would have changed his situation, but that was his other option. Why did he not go that route? Why did he insist on defending his father by saying that he didn't do those things? I would like an answer to that, and I hope that I'm able to get an answer to that. So that is a question I had pertaining to the story. But as a discussion point, I can't remember what exactly the question was, but I had a question as yes. Well, it's not really a question, it's just something that I would like to discuss with someone. If you would like to talk about these books, please, I like talking to people about books. Slide in my DMs on Instagram. I'm always so excited to talk to people about things. But something I was curious about was how in stories like this, even though military power should technically be aiding the emperor, and they should be working hand in hand to making sure that this empire is great and whatnot, but for the most part, they're usually at loggerheads with each other. And that's usually from the emperor's side, because he fears the military power and the ability that they have to probably usurp the throne and take him out of his standing of power or whatever. But I just thought it was very interesting. Like, this military pretty much works for you. Why do you see them as your enemy? But I guess I just answered that question as well. But if you had anything else to add to it, again, this is something that I would really like to discuss. If this is something you've thought about and you just have more to add to what I already said, please feel free to share it in the comments, or again, slide into my DMs. But yes, that was that category. Then the next one was logic. I feel like I just mixed up intrigue with logic. The questions were actually pertaining to logic, but for the most part, I understand everything that's going on in the world, and I gave this category 8.5 points. I felt like I understood the world. There were things that I felt like will be revealed later, but they're not purposefully being hidden from you to confuse you. I feel like they're being placed well in the story at a time or at the correct time to make the story feel as intriguing and enjoyable as possible. Because there are times that you can read something and you feel like details are being hidden from you, and they're hidden from you in a way that bothers you and actually hinders you from enjoying the story. But that's not the case here. There are things that I don't know, but I'm not too worried about them, and they do not prevent me from reading the story. That's what I was trying to say. So that's the logical aspect of the story that I enjoyed, and I understood it, and I just enjoyed how the story was written in general, and all the questions that I mentioned in the prior category that should have been part of this logic category. This is all over the place. I should have put more thought into this before filming this video, but I think I still got some good things out, so I'm just going to leave it as is. And then for the final category, enjoyment. I'm pretty sure I've used the word enjoy a lot in this video, but obviously you can tell I enjoyed this. I gave this category 10 points. There was a little bit of worry I had about this underperforming because of all the hype around it. You know that happens when something has so much hype and you finally decide to read it and you feel like it was underwhelming. I really didn't want that to happen, and I'm really excited. I'm really happy that it did not. This book really did meet my expectations of it. I'm tempted to go and try to look for the fan translation online because it was so good, and even talking about this and filming the review, I don't think that has gotten out all the excitement out of my body, and I feel like I still have to relieve that excitement in some way, and I feel like the only way I can do that right now is to read the rest of the book. I'm going to be staying up again this night. I can just feel it already. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was 10 points, and I think that was a total of 66 out of 70 points. A whopping 9.4 something, or maybe it was 9.5 something, 5 stars. I enjoyed this. So that was my unplanned attempt at reviewing this book that I really enjoyed. I hope I at least did a decent enough job of it. Have you read the book, or do you plan to read it? Did you find this video helpful, or did it change your mind if you weren't planning to read it? I hope that you are at least able to gain something from my rambling and talking through my experience of reading the book. So that brings this video to an end. Whatever day you find yourself watching this, make it a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. As the only surviving member of his reviled line, Sean Zertron bears the hatred of the nation, and no one's hate burns hotter than that of... Nothing ever goes well for me. I'm gonna start that again. I enjoy this. I'm not doing that again.